Hello, and welcome to this video, in which we'll be learning how to play the Lab Rats character expansion, The Too Many Bones. Let's dive right in. The Lab Rats are a group of 4 apprentices, Gerbil, Helix, Slank, and Flan, that manage to escape the notorious lab of Nobulus. During Too Many Bones setup, the players will choose 2 of the 4 Lab Rats to join the party. Players can place their lab mats, their stat dice, and their chips and HP in front of them. The remaining materials for the other Lab Rats should be set aside, as the player will not have access to them until their innate +1 is reached. Now, only a single Lab Rat may be active at a time, which is known as being tagged in. The player can switch their active Lab Rat at the start of battle by tagging out, which we'll go over soon. The Lab Rats also share stats, skills, initiative, and loot as a group, though each has its own HP. Since they do share these stats, the HP stat of all Lab Rats is increased by the stat die in the HP slot, even if the die is in another Lab Rat's mat. 5 of these 3 HP chips are included, which can help keep track of any inactive Lab Rat HP. Pretty nifty, huh? The 4 Lab Rats are collectively considered a single gear lock, and in-battle effects are applied to the active Lab Rat. Any effects to HP outside of battle are applied to the Lab Rat of the player's choice. Other effects will affect all Lab Rats. Every Lab Rat has a stat die that belongs to them, and only stat dice of Lab Rats that have joined the party may be used. These can be used to increase the Lab Rat's stats up to a value of 3. In addition, the Lab Rats collectively have 16 skill dice, but their skills area can only hold up to 4 at a time. When a skill die is acquired, it can be placed in any of these skill slots, but if the skill area was to exceed 4 dice, any extra would be returned to the storage tray. The Lab Rats may acquire the number 1 skill die of any Lab Rat's profession, even those not yet in the party, by spending a single training point. Spending another training point on the same profession merits the next skill die to their skill area, and the previous die in that profession is replaced and put back in storage. Let's say that Flan's number 1 die, Restorator, was gained previously. The player could spend another training point to replace it with the next die in line, Super Restorator. Later on, the player could get Restorator 64, the number 3 die, by spending yet another training point. Additionally, there are 2 Contraption Dice, which are number 4 dice and are a mix of 2 professions. Slank and Gerbil's contraption is known as the Electrobladerator. Flan and Helix's contraption is known as the Virtual Redistorter Boy 2000. Nobody really knows why. These are acquired by spending a training point, then returning one of the number 3 die of the respective Lab Rats to the storage tray. For example, the Slank and Gerbil Contraption Dice can replace either Bladerator's Revenge or Electroscalpel, the Final Cut, as they are the number 3 dice for those gear locks. Note, the player may not have more than 1 die from each profession at a time, and contraptions are considered their own separate professions. Now, as we all know, sometimes technologies have malfunctions, which must be rejiggered a little before releasing the next iteration. Just the same, these skill dice may sometimes roll a malfunction, which is shown in the upper right-hand corner. These must be resolved when rolled, which means the die cannot be returned to the skills area. Instead, when a die with a malfunction would be exhausted, it is returned to the storage tray. This profession can be acquired again only by starting with the number 1 skill die, then upgrading as the player wishes. If a skill die does not have the malfunction symbol, then it is treated as normal when exhausted. Fortunately, each Lab Rat has a profession line matching their color, which represents the equipment they are proficient with. Lab Rats who are proficient with a certain piece of equipment can ignore any malfunctions on that equipment. Additionally, any skill die matching the active Lab Rat that would be exhausted is instead returned to the skills area. Unfortunately, the Lab Rats are proficient with neither contraptions nor consumables. So let's talk a little bit about how these guys are used in battle. Before a battle, the player must declare an active Lab Rat. Only 1 Lab Rat may be active at any time, but it may tag out of battle to allow one of its fellows to take its place. In order to tag out, the player must declare so at the end of their turn, by flipping the chip of the active Lab Rat. This may only be done as long as there is a Lab Rat within the party that hasn't already battled. After the end of the round, the Lab Rat that is tagging out has its chip and HP removed from the battle mat and placed beside his mat. The Lab Rat tagging in is placed in the battle mat position of the tagging out Lab Rat, along with its corresponding HP. This new Lab Rat retains the same initiative spot as the previous Lab Rat. Additionally, all dice are transferred from the tagged out teammate's mat to the tagged in lab rat, as well as anything in its prep area or on its chip, such as status effects. The tagged out lab rat's mat is then turned sideways to indicate that it cannot tag back in during this battle. Once the battle is over, all lab rat mats are turned right side up again. If a tag out is declared, then the active lab rat is KO'd after the declaration. The lab rat that is tagging in still joins that battle after the end of the round. The initiative die is retained in this case as well, as the new lab rat will have the same initiative placement. When this new lab rat is added to the battle mat, it is placed in a gearlock starting position, matching its attack form. No tag out can be declared if there is no lab rat on the battle mat due to being KO'd, but nice try. Note: during the recovery phase, the Rest and Recover option heals any single lab rat to full health. Other KO'd lab rats recover a single HP each. Before we move on with the elucidation of each individual skill die, we should talk about the innate. First off, there is an innate +1, which the lab rats share. This can be achieved up to twice over the course of an adventure by using 4 bones from their backup plan. Using the innate +1 allows the party to locate another lab rat that will join the party for the remainder of the adventure. The player chooses one of the lab rats not yet in play, takes its mat, and places it next to the lab rats already in the party. Its chip is placed in its prep area with full HP, and the stat die of its color is placed next to the active lab rat's mat. From here on out, this lab rat is available for tag-in, and its stat die can now be used to increase his stat when spending training points. Each individual lab rat also has its own innate, shown on their individual cards, which also contain their own individual backup plans. Slank ignores all malfunctions as his innate. Ambidextrous allows Helix to roll skill dice without spending dexterity. Flan's resourceful innate lets her re-roll a single unused die on each turn. Finally, Gerbil has surgical, which means she gains 1 bones each time a baddie is defeated. These are gained from the attack and defense supply. Now, the skill dice. We'll go over each category, which are based off of each lab rat. Note: as each profession is advanced, there will be fewer bones rolled, as well as less of a chance for mechanical failures, i.e. malfunctions. Slank skills have to do with the Bladerator, which, besides bones, has 2 different results. This provoke side deals the number of damage shown to a non-adjacent unit, then that unit's initiative die is placed after the lab rats. This does mean that if the unit already activated this round, it will act again, so use this carefully on baddies or strategically on party members. The Exhaustion Result is applied to an adjacent baddie. Then, at the start of each round, that baddie takes 1 true damage and the counter is then reduced by 1. If this die has the infinity sign, then the effect lasts the entirety of the battle. Gerbil's skills have to do with the Electro Scalpel. The Pulse Emitter result adds the number of damage shown to a successfully rolled attack die. The Spatial Disruptor side allows the active lab rat to be placed on any available position on the battle mat, and it may also select a new target. Now let's go over the first contraption, which replaces either Slank or Gerbil's number 3 die. This is known as the Electrobladerator. In addition to the Exhaustion and Pulse Emitter results, this contraption has Execute. When Execute is rolled, the player deals 2 true damage to an adjacent baddie with a shown point value or lower. If this is used in fatigue rounds or Exhaustion is on the baddie, then the baddie is defeated, or executed. Flan's skills have to do with the Restorator. The first result is Force Field, which, when applied to a unit, removes all negative effect dice from that unit. Additionally, when an effect die would be placed on that unit, this counter is reduced by 1, and the effect die is ignored. The Regenerator result heals any unit or inactive lab rat shown for the number of HP. Helix's skills have to do with the Sonic Distorter. First, the Reverberator result can be placed in either an ally's active slot or the character's own active slot. The number of damage shown is dealt back to the baddie for each defense die removed from the unit's active slots by the attack. The Absorberator result is placed the same way in either the character's or an ally's active slots. The next time this unit loses HP, the number of defense shown are gained after removing the HP. Now, the second contraption, the Virtual Redistorter Boy 2000, which can replace either Flan's or Helix's number 3 die. In addition to the Absorberator and Regenerator results, this die has the Untargetable result. This allows for the placement of an untargetable effect die on any unit. Finally, let's move on to something more scrumptious, the Consumables. Just kidding, don't eat these. They're not as good as Tide Pods. First, I want to note that even though the Consumables are numbered 1 and 2, they cannot be gained as a skill die. Like all Consumables, they must be gained through a fortunate discovery. The first, Silver Adhesiverator, will either give 3 bones, which is a healthy boost, or the Duct Tape result. The expenditure of the Duct Tape result allows the player to ignore malfunctions for the duration of a battle. The second die, the Rejuvenator, has 2 results. The first result, Magnetic Restorative Imaging, heals all units in inactive lab rats the shown value of HP. The second result, Power Nap, turns a tagged out lab rat's mat right side up, allowing for it to tag in once again this battle. Now we've gone over each Gearlock's innate abilities, as well as the skill dice concomitant with each. For our final topic, we must discuss backup plans, as each Gearlock has its own. First, Slank. Minor Repair allows the acquisition of a number 1 skill die by spending 1 bones. This does not include Consumables, as they must be gained via Fortunate Discovery, as noted before. Handy immediately sets the round counter to the Fatigue round for a price of 2 bones. At 3 bones, De-Escalate allows for the placement of a stun effect die on any baddie of 5 points or less. Next up, Helix. Improvise gains Helix 2 bones to his backup plan, using attack or defense dice from the supply. For 2 bones, Equipment Mod can change the results of any 2 unused dice that were rolled this turn. These can be changed to any result of the player's choice. His 3 bones ability, Steel Tech, allows the player to draw loot. Now, Gerbil. At 1 bones, Gerbil can deal 1 true damage to an adjacent baddie. Incision, costing 2 bones, adds a bleed effect die to an adjacent baddie. For 3, Gerbil can swipe right, which heals any inactive lab rat to full HP. Then, she immediately tags out, and the healed lab rat tags in, even if said lab rat already tagged out during the battle. Finally, Flan. For a single bone, Big Bolts allows her to place Poison 1 on any 2 baddies. For 2 bones, Bat Scan transfers a defense dice from any unit to another unit. Bat Bites at 3 bones is the same as Big Bolts, except it places Poison 2 on any 2 baddies. And this concludes our How to Play video for the Lab Rats.